So, so we're gonna start with the Historic and Architectural Review Board meeting first, and then once that's completed, we'll go to the Planning and Zoning. So at 6 o'clock, I'm gonna call to order the Historic and Architectural Review Board. Has everybody had a chance to review the agenda? All right, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
A motion to approve the agenda.
Oh. So we have an interesting note to item 2 under presentation. We're deleting the reference to Historic Preservation Month, should read Historic District Design Standards. So we're gonna, on item number 2, we wanna scratch out where it says Historic Preservation Month and change that to Historic District Design Standard. Everybody cool? All right, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as discussed? I got a motion from Ms. Thomas.
Second.
I got a second from Ms. Baker. Do I have any comments on this agenda from our dais? Public comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. Well, hometown hero, Kathy Thomas, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Move to approve the consent agenda. We ready? Got a motion on that?
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
I got a motion from Ms. Baker.
I second that.
I got a second from Vice Chair Long. All those comments on the consent agenda? Public comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. And we'll move on to JP. Will you lead us in that discussion of the Historic District Design Standards, please?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Turn this back. We're just getting the presentation loaded. Several months back, we were contemplating a demolition of a structure as well as the construction of a new home within the historic district. Part of that discussion was for just a review of what our historical design standards are. So tonight I'll be presenting to you just what the city standards are, just for a matter of discussion to see if they are sufficient. If you want to direct staff to do additional research and come back to the HARB, or if we need something more than the standards that are currently present in Article 11. So we are live. So just going over Article 11, which is for our historic sites and structures. It establishes the board powers, defines historical properties, criteria for applications, criteria for designation of historic properties, and it also gives rules for changes to historic properties as well. And that's section 1111, and that's what I'm going to be drilling down on tonight for my presentation to get some feedback from the board. So in Article 11.11, there are 2 levels of changes that are noted there. There are minor changes, and then there are major changes. Minor changes are re-roofing, replacements, accessory structures, decks, fences, driveways, signs, usually things that don't affect the architectural integrity of a building or a site. And these are approved administratively, so staff will issue a certificate of appropriateness for these level of changes so they don't come before the board. And it's not uncommon that historic preservation boards will often, once there's like a clear direction from the board, assign certain things to be done administratively And these are just some of the ones that we have in our code for staff to approve. Minor changes require consistency with the Newberry Vision sub-element, which is in the future land use element. I'm just going to touch on a few policies from that sub-element. And minor changes also have to be consistent with the surrounding properties and have to be compatible with the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. The Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation are not regulatory. They are only advisory. Unless you are benefiting from a tax incentive program, federal tax incentive program, then they become regulatory. Then you have to apply to them or adhere to them. They are prohibitive because they are expensive, some of the changes that they require. Same materials, craftsmanship that doesn't occur anymore, and whatnot. So. From the Newberry Vision sub-element, we have the desire, it's a policy to establish design standards and for newly constructed buildings, exterior improvements, and new or reconstructed parking areas with 5 or more spaces. Also preserving historical architecture and promoting traditional architecture and improvement of like walkability and multimodal options throughout the district. Now, major changes are simply defined as not minor changes. They are new construction, alterations to the structure, demolition, and relocation of structures within the district. These do require public hearings, and they also get a certificate of appropriateness for design. And these are the criteria for new construction, alterations, and relocation. Would you like me to read them? Okay, this was included in the backup. So they become arbitrary to some effect, and you are the arbiters of whether they are consistent with the district, consistent with the surrounding properties, and whatnot. For demolition, there's only 2 criteria. Preceding the criteria is a statement that all other options have been exhausted. So in the case where there's clearly no other option but to demolish it, as long as they satisfy these 2, it should be appropriate for issuance of a certificate of appropriateness for demolition. And that's where I leave you. Those are our regulations. I haven't included in this presentation anything more than that. I do have some backup slides of examples of design guidelines from other districts, but I'm not presenting them at this time. But if you request them, I can.
Does you guys have any?
You're okay with the standards as they are?
I have some comments.
Okay, sure,
I
Joe.
was looking at Joe. I kind of felt like he was.
To consider is a possibility of something I talked about the last time, that before we approve demolition of a structure, we have a structural engineer registered in the state of Florida for a structural analysis and see, if the structure is viable, and give some idea what it would cost to make it viable, or we issue, the demolition approval. And the second thing would be to, they're saying the structure is unsound because of termites or some other pests in the house that we have. Was it possible to add those things into the ordinance so we have those 2 reports? But I think it would be good for the board members to actually, go to the structure, maybe meet with the historic preservation planner at the site after these reports are done, just to see, whether you can show the viability or unviability of saving the structure. Is that something that the board would consider reasonable to include? Because I think it's subjective. Other than that, the last time we went through this, we heard, that the structure was structurally unsound, infestation, and damage the structure. So
having those two professions look at the structure and see if it was worth saving.
For clarification, Joe, when you say a board member, do you like signify like singular, like one board member at least, or do you want the full board to be there?
I would like the board to actually go to the structure with the historic preservation planner to, after
the
the
site.
reports were done to the site, to go ahead and see firsthand, you know, what some of these things that might have been included that made the structure not viable per se, before we issue, you know, the approval for demolition.
Mr. Chair, may I add Joe's comments?
Yes.
Thank you. That is common practice in other historic districts. You have some sort of justification report showing that structural integrity is gone, that the repair is going to be more than 50% of the value of the property. Same for the pest control. Oftentimes these old wood structures are, you know, the foundations get deteriorated for those pier and pillar construction. And so there's unfortunately in certain cases no salvaging certain properties. And I learned that termites don't stop at wood, they eat concrete too. So yeah, it's not uncommon for a historic board to ask or the code to require them to provide these reports.
And when you say it's not uncommon, is it uncommon? Because that's a fairly high level of specificity. Is it just a justification report? So show us what you've done and give that, or is it a checklist of you have to do all these things? And if it's a checklist of very specific requirements, is that on the property owner to pay for all of those things, or is the city coming in, Historic Preservation Board covering those costs? How does that work?
No, the costs are borne by the applicant, and the report is very similar to an appraisal report. There will be photographs and documentation of the damage that is subject to the structure, and yeah, it's a pretty detailed report. It's not elaborated in the code specifically. I believe it's kind of like a common report that are prepared by structural engineers.
It would be a report that would be worked out with city staff and the applicant about what would count? Or is it a checklist, you have to get pest control, you have to get structural engineering? That's what I'm asking.
Gotcha.
Is this normally that level? Because those are good suggestions, but they're very, very specific.
Yeah.
And I think generally boards want to be more policy,
Yes.
not necessarily thou shalt do X, Y, and Z. And that gives some latitude to staff to work independently with the applicants on what makes sense in any individual situation.
Certainly.
I guess that's my question.
Certainly. It can be a vague requirement in the code that you provide it or justification. And no, it's not something that the board would need to work out. It would be, if you're requesting a demolition, you'd have to provide some sort of justification for that demolition. If it's, due to, structural integrity being compromised, then show us that's the case, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Chair, one idea could be, rather than make it hard and fast policy in an ordinance with that level of specificity, as John Paul mentioned, the ordinance will require a justification report, but then say, right now, you have to have a building permit for demolition. It could be that the building permit for demolition of a historic structure has additional requirements built into it, like the termite report, structural engineering report, that kind of thing. And that's where the policy would actually be implemented, but not necessarily in the hard and fast ordinance. You wouldn't be codified necessarily. And that way, if the board or the commission decided they wanted to make changes, it's easier to implement those and faster to implement those changes.
Well, to me, objective and subjective, something is done like this. I mean, I think this has been done before the board, probably more and more. Personally, I'm an engineer, okay, so, I'm looking at things. Information, that would be objective. Third party, go in there and take a look at it in the structural. I know that being in the historic district that I live in,
So my question is, what's the cost comparison to an average appraisal compared to what we're asking here? Because, I mean, if an appraisal is 400, but to ask the applicant to, or the person looking at doing this, to add an additional $200 just to, that's another burden that this person that's trying to get things rectified.
Maybe it's not, architect, there could be some other design professional, could be a contractor potentially, I mean, but you want to broaden it up, but I think someone that has expertise in, buildings, structures would be someone that would do it. So maybe an architect might have a different view than a contractor, so maybe John Paul could look at, maybe contacting some organizations, with professionals, see what generally the range of costs would be.
That's one of my concerns, is adding more costs to the applicant. As far as trying to be fiscally responsible as a city, we also want to make sure that our application, or whoever is having to deal with this, we're being fiscally responsible to them, and we're not asking them to pay even more money and more money and more money to get something that they want done.
Yeah. That's information I don't have, but I can come back with it, certainly.
Mr. Chair? How much does an average demolition of a house cost?
I don't know. I've seen demolition of a house in Hollywood cost $15,000, but I don't know how much they go for today. That's a great question.
So while I can understand, Mr. Chair, that, like, not adding to the cost, they're already paying quite a bit to have a house demolished. And I agree with Mr. Montalto that we should have some sort of objective criteria when we're talking about demolishing a historic building.
Yeah, there's no disagreement in the fact that there needs to be due diligence done before a demolition is. You can't just be like, I'm gonna demolish this and build from scratch. That's definitely not what we're getting at here, or at least where I'm trying to get at here. I'm just trying to figure out what the cost comparison is, who's weighing what. Is it on the city, which we just found out it's not, it's more on the applicant, and you're absolutely right, they're already paying, just use the $15,000 for example, $15,000, what's another $100 or $200 to get what we're asking for here? It's just to get more details before we jump and make a final decision on this is what we're gonna do. I like to have everything out in the open. Before we commit to saying, yeah, we want to add that, and then before we know it, it costs $1,000 or it costs a lot more than what we. So I would like to have more numbers and send staff back to find a little bit more, if possible, what those costs would be. Kathy, did you have a question?
Yeah, because I'm relatively new to this process, not new to the city, obviously, but new to the process. And I'm very much in favor of saving any architectural structures that we have that are no longer, you can't get buildings like some of the ones we have, houses and everything. Don't we have in place, no, I don't think anyone can just go and demolish a house without, and I'm just thinking about the First Baptist house. That was dealt with over a long period of time. Yeah, very long. Now I'm getting confused and thinking maybe we don't have the guardrails up like we should. I mean, I thought that if you were going to demolish something in a historical district that you had to have, there was already a criteria. Am I wrong?
We do. What we're talking about right now is just additional application requirements.
So additional
Yeah.
to what we already
Just
have.
justifying your request to demolish something. So just asking a little bit more of the applicant.
What are the qualifications right now, just plain and simple?
For demo?
Nope, to get a permit, like, do they have to have a structural engineer or contractor? They have to have the pest control, any of that? Just, like, can anyone go up and say, oh, my contractor friend looked at this and now we're just gonna?
If we're talking about a house outside of the
Yep.
historic
No,
district.
in historic.
In the historic district, today, no.
Okay,
You don't need those reports.
okay.
But, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the only two historic buildings that have come down that I can think of right now, both went through very long, drawn-out processes, lots of attempts to get public financing, public monies, partnerships, grants, and both the First Baptist was a 7-year process, 3 years, last 3 years with the city actively. So we had 2 or 3 different building inspectors that went in and looked at that house, not about demolition, but about the conversation. We had fire chiefs go in and look at it. So, I mean, I think this is a good question, but it almost seems like we have two situations. Like somebody has just bought a house in the historic district and is saying, hey, I want to tear it down now because I can build something new. In that situation, I think all of these extra stuff, right, sounds like it makes sense. In a situation where we've been part of the process for a long time, that's why I'm not objecting to the idea. I think it's a good idea, but I want to make sure we don't tie our hands that all of these things have to be done, because in the situation over here, we were part of that process. So then to say after 3 years of having our own inspectors go in and out, looking at it and seeing, to then say, yeah, but we don't trust our own building inspectors to do this. Look, you have to go spend money on a structural engineer. I can see that applicant saying, I've been here with you for 3 years, right? Your 3 building inspectors have told me that this can't happen. So all my only suggestion is to let's think about how do we keep it to where there's some situational awareness that can happen, so that we don't find ourselves in that situation and we still have to check all these boxes, even though we're the ones that have said, hey, we've been in here, we see all the damage, we can't get the public. So that's my advice, is not to make it so specific that you can't get around it.
Mr. Chair, can I speak? And that's why, the 3 things I mentioned, was pest control. I also mentioned the board going to the property, because ultimately, even if we have an engineering report or a pest control report, it's up to the board to decide if they're going to approve demolition or not, considering everything. So I think that to your point, Mayor Mullen, I think that the ultimate decision is this board. So even if we're asking for this criteria, to help us make that decision, we don't necessarily have to follow whatever recommendations that are in these reports. It's up to the board to decide whether or not, because there are unmitigating circumstances that would make sense to demo a structure. So I don't think this is taking anything away from the board if we have these reports.
I want to take this one step further here with the board recommendation. If we are brought forth to discuss a possible demolition, do we still stay as an advisory board to the commission and it goes before the dais, or do we are a one-stop shop on that point?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just wanted for the record that this doesn't go and say, hey, commission, we advise that we should or should not do this, and then they decide finally. It is us making that final decision.
Can I add to Mr. Mayor's comments? We can bake into the code, if we amend it, option to have the land development and regulation administrator or the city manager or their designee allow waiving of certain application requirements based on the situation, and I don't think that would be out of practice.
Chair.
Yes.
I think any layer there, I could be persuaded on. I mean, if someone gets a structural engineering report and it says that it can't be saved, I can't imagine the HARB saying, well, I know the report says it can't be saved, but we're not going to approve. If this board has the ability not to look at that, or to make a decision without that, if I'm the applicant, then I would say, well, but I still have to spend all of this money ahead of time to even get to where you might say, well, yeah, but I don't, we're not gonna look at that information. So I just think that somewhere along the line, there needs to be the ability, because again, the only 2 situations, and I take Joe's point, I think it's spot on, and it's what we need to be focused on. These buildings are only getting older, right? This issue is going to grow. We have to figure out. But I also have a lot of, when are we telling the person that's buying the historic house this, right? Or is the realtor in charge of saying, hey, you're buying a historic house, and no matter what you get into here, you're gonna have to fix it, or you're gonna have to come and this board can say, like, I need a little more information about that process. I could be persuaded that the city should be involved somehow in helping to pay for some of these kinds of things. Like, if we want to value our historic district, I don't want to get out of control, but I think that there should be some, historic district HOA was an idea that this board floated around the last time. I thought there was some merit to look into that. I just don't want to get us locked into something that doesn't allow us. In this last situation, Brian had been in that house, Mike had been in that house, like I say, 2 or 3 building department had been in that house. I can't imagine then saying to the church, but you can still, after all of that, you still have to go get somebody else to tell us what we all already know. So, and when you put things in the language, this is what I always warn the commission about, right? When you write a rule, our staff is going to follow that rule. And they don't have a choice. They have to follow the rule. And oftentimes it's the boards that come back because someone local complains and them, and they're like, well, this is a stupid rule. And then the board's like, well, that's a stupid rule. And I'm like, well, y'all passed the rule. Staff has just followed the rules that y'all passed. So, think about who could come and say, I got to spend $1,000 on a structural engineer, and I've had everybody in here, and everybody knows this house is falling down. Why do I got to? I'm already spending $15,000 to tear it down. Now I got to spend another $1,000, another. That's the conversation that I hear, because that's the conversation that I get to have so frequently, right? So I like a little bit of latitude. I like boards to stay at the 20,000 foot, and I like to empower our professional staff to come to us and say, hey, this person just bought this house a year ago. They knew what they were getting into. They have no leg to stand on. Or, hey, we've been working with this person for 3 years, and we can't find any public interest, any grant dollars. We've seen the termites with ourselves. That's how I think we all get along in a small town a little bit better.
Yes.
One way we can avoid adding too much cost onto the applicant is just simply saying, whatever your justification that you're making, that you're claiming, you have to have a report that justifies that. So if you've got a building that's riddled with termites, then you provide a termite report. You don't need a structural engineering report if the termite report says that it's riddled with termites. Right. Or if you're claiming there's been settling and there's so much settling that has gone on that it's extremely cost prohibitive to try to mitigate, something like that, then the structural engineering without the termite report could suffice. It doesn't have to be the typical government response where you have to do these 10 things before you can get your approval. You just tailor it to whatever the claim you're making. That's fine. Provide some documentation from a professional, and that could suffice. Something like that.
JP, as it stands right now, before a demolition happens, it still has to come to us, correct?
Certainly.
I'm in agreement, certainly, to Member Joe saying for us to visit the site. I think it's imperative as well for us to be eyewitnesses to what they're asking to be demolished. So I'm 100% on board with that. I think that's a great idea. The church happened to be right in front of us every time we walked into a meeting, so we could definitely see what was going on with that one. But as far as adding costs, I would like some more. I personally would like more pricing, more clarity on what this is going to cost, where is it going to go, and then I think we can, take it from there and see if it's reasonable, and move with that. I don't know how the rest of the board feels. I definitely like going to visiting the site, and I would just like some more clarity and more evidence on what the costs are to the applicant if we were to request more evidence from them.
Yeah,
Get like kind of head nod or?
I do, yeah.
Yes.
I think I said this a few months ago, and not to keep the conversation going, but I would, like Mayor Marlowe just suggested HOA, I would like to get something in, not rock solid, that's not correct, but something that, like you said, a real estate person needs to let this person know that's going to buy in the historical district. There's going to be, somebody has to be able to have that information up front and I'm just using the building over there, for instance. If we really wanted to save that building, it would have been done like 10 years ago. So how do we get to the point where, okay, we value our historical district, but how do we get to the point where we identify these structures and we put the labels on them? These are to be restored, or this cannot be restored, and then whoever's selling that can say, okay, this is in the historical district. These are the rules and regulations that you're gonna have to follow to improve on this property or demolish it or whatever. This is what you're gonna have to do. So where do we start? Like, I'm thinking of the Bank of Newberry. It's been on my mind a lot the last couple of years. Like, what's going on in there? We don't even know. That building is so old. And there's beautiful tin work on the ceilings. I mean, there's so much in there. But my question is, where do we, it seems like such a huge problem. Where do we start? Where do we have that definite starting place where, like, this is in the historical district? Like in Gainesville, they have the duck pond area. I mean, they have rules and regulations that you cannot go in there and just change just because it's, falling down or whatever. And I realize there are instances that we have to demolish something. But I would like to see us do something that puts us in a position where instead of always playing defense, we're going on the offense a little bit. We're not always just trying to get by with something, but we're trying to build on it. You know what I'm saying?
That was
You know what I'm saying?
That was the suggestion that I made with Vice Chair Long at the last one, and that's where the HOA comment came up.
Yeah.
Whereas an HOA, and I hate to say HOA, but it's just a perfect example of when in an HOA, the HOA sees paint starting to deteriorate, the lawn's not being taken care of.
Right.
The first thing they start doing is like, they start sending notices. Like, hey, you need to fix this. Hey, this is becoming an issue. Before a $500 problem becomes
Right.
a $50,000
Right.
problem, and then that becomes a, hey, I have to demolish it.
Right.
I'm sorry. Like, no, you knew this was happening, and you waited to 10 years
Right.
for a bigger issue. So that's where we begin in square one.
That's what I
is-
wonder. Where are we starting? Are we gonna have a starting point? Are we gonna, like, the Bank of Newberry has already been sold, where there's nothing we can do about that now. Is that correct?
Well, it's privately owned.
Right, that's what I
But
mean. It's gone.
We have and we never owned it.
Yeah. But we
but-
could have. That's what I'm saying. Like, where do we start?
Well, I mean, the
Keeping
city could
things.
begin to buy, but the last time we bought a building, didn't
Yeah.
work out real well.
Right.
I think that the starting place is to ask our CRA board director to come and talk to us about how the CRA, which has funding, could be used to help with some of these questions, right? I mean, I think that Newberry doesn't know how grateful we should be to the owner of 1906 Farmhouse, right? This is a man who went in and bought this building, did all of the work to restore it, but if you talk to him about that process, he will tell you that if he knew everything he knows now, he probably wouldn't have embarked on that. And so it is, I mean, that's the same thing that happened with the church, right? They had
Oh,
every
yeah.
intention of restoring that building and using it for the youth services and all those kinds of things, and then when they got into it, the cost began to mount, the projected cost began to mount, and it's like, okay, it's too
And-
much.
Yeah, I
right?
was on that board, and it
And
was
too much.
astronomical.
It gets
Yes,
out.
it was
And I've
unbelievable.
actually talked to the doc at the Bank of Newberry building, and you're looking at 7 figures to restore that building.
So I'm wondering still, like, with the Berry building, I remember exactly what happened to that building as well. It wasn't a viable situation. But if we can identify the buildings now that we want to save, can
Right.
we start fresh now
Yeah.
and say, okay, we're gonna try to find funding or a grant or whatever for these particular buildings and start from there, instead of waiting till,
Which
We
is
have-
the conversation we had with the church, right? Like, we
Yep.
always come in at the end.
Yep.
And then you're saying to someone, well, you've got to spend all this money.
yep,
And they're saying, I don't have it. So I mean, I think we are all in agreement. And that's why I think what we should do is let our creative folks say, look, we got a CRA, that's part of redeveloping the historic district. let's put a little money behind it. And let's start, I also think if you watch the State of the City, we're going to start a Newberry Historic Society so that we can assign to a group of people what are the buildings that we really want to save, what are the stories that we really want to save, and start getting the energy to save these buildings. Because when the demolition crew sets up, we get a whole lot of energy. But when we're on Facebook, I had speeches saying, we got to save this building, it's falling flat. So somewhere we have a disconnect with that. People
Yeah.
care about the buildings we don't care about the buildings.
I agree.
think we care about the buildings, but I think we need to take a little bit of that CRA money and sit down with some people and figure out how do we be proactive
Right,
at these
proactive.
buildings, at saving these.
Football, defense and offense.
Right.
Right. So
That would be my
all that
suggestion.
energy that came over to this house, I mean, how well would that, what kind of things could we do if that energy was put towards,
Everybody just donated $5 that way.
right. And there was a lot of people at the very end that were just extremely vocal. So I wonder if we could, like you said, there's a disconnect somewhere. It doesn't get, the excitability doesn't come until it's done. That's sad.
So JP, it sounds like you got some homework to do.
I do, yeah, thanks for noticing that.
Is there any other, feedback we want to give to I don't think there's anything we're gonna do tonight on this particular item other than give them homework to come back with some pricing, some more evidence, some more, what we all discussed here. Thanks, JP.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, next presentation, we have, I believe Mike New, city manager, is gonna discuss renovation of Newberry's electric generating plant.
Story buildings. Wow, look at that.
What a coincidence. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike New. I'm the city manager. And I understood from your last meeting that you guys wanted a presentation on some work we did with a local architect who's helped us on a number of projects, including our upcoming City Hall project. The genesis of this was the City Commission voicing the exact same concern that this board is voicing. What are we doing to preserve historic buildings in Newberry, but particularly the historic buildings that the city owns? Kind of on the heels of tearing down the Berry House, while we all stood outside and cried that we had allowed it to get that far. So we got with an architect, and I want to put a great big caveat on this. We developed some renderings and some what-ifs, but the list of potential what-ifs was limitless. So don't take for a second that the commission directed us to do it this way. That I think we're thinking about contemplating a public meeting place where you could rent a room and people could come in and use public facilities to have an impromptu meeting of sorts. So, which is an idea, but we've also heard make it a sandwich shop, make it a tap house, make it available to the private. There's limitless number of what you could do with Newberry's old power plant. Please don't get caught up in what we did with this architectural, his review, his analysis, and what we really wanted to do, and I have just learned that on projects like this, a picture is worth more than 1,000 words. And so if we could communicate what this architect saw as potential to the public, then it might get those creative juices moving, and that would garner some momentum to do something with the facility. And I would say that since this PowerPoint was put together, this presentation was put together, the commission funded us getting a new roof on that building so that we could minimize the damage, and we haven't moved full-blown into a 6 or 7 figure project, but the commission has indicated to us their desire to make sure that that building doesn't degrade, that it ends up being rehabilitated and restored so that our public has access to it. Another building I think that wasn't in as tough a shape as the Berry House or this building, but the commission has indicated a real willingness to upgrade is our municipal building. It was structurally fine. It was a little tired, or it has been a little tired. And over the last 3 years, the city commission has funded probably close to $100,000 worth of improvements into that building so that it's more than fine, so that they know that it'll be around for the next 100 years for the next generations of Newberryans to enjoy. So with that very long introduction, I'll try to go briefly through this. I wanted to make sure everybody takes time to read all that fine print. These are available in a printed format, and you could actually read that fine print. Just some overall, we ended up with a nice glossy handout. So this slide deck is doing that, or showing much of the stuff that was in there, but just kind of general project information about the community and about the building. Yeah, these are old construction costs. So, and the facility we're talking about is an old, we call it the old power plant, but actually it served as both the power plant and the water plant for the city from the 1930s probably up through the 1950s. It's still down, it's across the street from Lois Fort Park. And so, you know, a target market was if the commission was interested in making this building available to the private sector. These are some of the this is something where a potential investor may come in and see what the market is that he could be trying to reach with the renovation of that building. More information about, you know, where is the building, what's the population. This is a demographic survey. Won't spend a lot of time there. Kind of a project schedule. I would say we didn't put any hard dates in there, which is good because we haven't started. It's just relatively looks like this would be potentially a 48-month project for us to undertake under normal city doing the business the way we do it. We certainly can slow projects down, and occasionally when we get real prompted by the commission, we'll speed them up. Some other facilities that have inspired our architect whenever they started looking at our building are showing on these photographs. More specific site plan, 3D site plan. This is kind of getting into the imagination of our architect. If you know the building where the power plant sits today, on the far right side of the screen where the street is, the other side of that street, the right side of that street would be Lois Fort Park. And everything on the left side of the screen is our public works compound where our water plant is and where our utility crews work out of. So we have this power plant building, and we envision maybe carving out a half-acre site that would be for public access. Right now, the whole compound is fenced off and is used only by city staff, and we use it as a storage building. It's our catch-all storage building. Christmas decorations, if you go in there today, you're liable to find a bunch of Christmas decorations. So we're not degrading the building, but we're not necessarily helping the building at all. And floor plan, this is exactly what you'll see. It consists of currently the stuff on the very left side, those are where we propose restrooms. The building has no restrooms, so if we're going to make it available for public use, we knew we'd have to do that. The architect felt like this was the best place. There in the middle, you see what looks like a conference room. That was the architect's idea for a big open space we have in there, was to make that a public meeting room. And then as you move on the right side of the building, the circled area on the top is a deep well. It's probably 10 feet diameter and 25 feet deep, and it used to hold the city's drinking water before it got pumped out into the city's water distribution system, and there was an elevated water tank on top. So right now, when you look at it, and you're me, and you work for the government, you think, well, that's just a great big liability. Somebody's kid's going to go over there and fall down in that thing, and we're going to be in trouble. So the architect recognized that it's still kind of a cool site, and so he proposed putting a plexiglass lid on that where you could see it, but not have any concerns about falling into it. Then some open space, and then at the very bottom is the generator room, where the original generator that made electricity for the city of Newberry still sits today. There's a lot of wonder is, could we restore it and make it run again? And I will tell you that in Newberry, Florida, I am confident that we could have a Saturday, everybody come on down, all of you smart ag people that know how to make these things work, and we'd get that sucker running by lunchtime. But it's nice. At minimum, we have thought that we would keep it for display purposes with maybe some plaques in there that kind of teach you the history. What Newberry did, and a lot of small cities did, was they'd put in a generator like that, and they'd run street lights at night, and then occasionally houses got hooked up to them. The one that they built that was very similar in Alachua, during the day it made ice for a private ice plant. And then at night it switched over and it ran street lights in the few houses that were connected to the electric grid there. Here's some renderings of cross sections of what the building could look like in the architect's opinion. Exterior view looking west. Same view. Site currently has no parking. None of the current requirements of a site plan for a commercial facility does this building meet. So rather than pay those costs, we just propose change the code and exempt ourselves. No, I'm just kidding. We wouldn't do that. We propose to add bathrooms, add parking, make it ADA accessible, all those things, if the building becomes used by the public. There's a rendering of some artwork. People go around and learn more about the building and our history. And there's the wet well where the water used to be stored before it was pumped into the system. More versions of the same. That's a poor rendering of what the generator actually looks like, but you get the idea. That one looks like it's almost all copper, which case the salvage value would be a whole lot more than the salvage value of this puppy. But it is cool to get in there and look at. It's a nice big room, and it is within weeks of having a brand new roof on it. Exactly. Yeah, it looks like they just pieced some things together. But just a number of different views. Here was a thought about what the conference room may look like. We had set it up with technology and AV, and then if you guys may pick it and say, I've got a work group coming to town, but I work out of my home, and I'd like to utilize that place. And it either, we could rent it for a fee, or we could just make it available for no fee. Exterior view, no, that was cross section. More live design. This designer's pretty slick. He can change this thing back and forth while you're sitting there. You say, well, what about this? And he'll make it happen. Here are the proposed next steps. We'd go into design development, develop construction drawings, get our permit documents, and then go into construction. Interior design. For a building like this, he just wanted to emphasize that if you really wanted to make it have that wow factor that the public would use, you definitely wouldn't want to do a rebuild of a remodeling of the building and forget that you need to do the last step, which is interior design, especially if it were something that were to be along the museum lines where you want to have information conveyed to the visiting public. There's quite a bit of science behind that, and he wanted to make sure that we were aware of that. More information on timelines, how we could pull this project up off if the community and the commission authorize it. And a cost analysis, I'll add all those numbers up. It was right at $675,000, and that was before the crazy, stupid increase we're seeing in electrical costs right now. But that was our bogus number, or our bogey number. That's what we put in this project is in our CIP, and it'll be adjusted by 50 or 100% to stay in our CIP. And design fees, which are normally just a percentage of overall construction cost. and then a whole bunch of sheets. The last 16 pages were about the design firm. And with that, I'm available for questions again. It's what could be happen, it's not what will happen. The community may have a great vision, and the commission send us on a whole different trail for what they'd like to see us do with that vision, although I'll just tell you now that the commitment to restore the building, to preserve the building and not allow it to decline further is absolutely being conveyed to staff from the commission. Y'all have a
I
great
love
evening.
this. This is exciting. As a little girl, I went to this place with my granddaddy with 55-gallon drums in the back of his truck to get water for his hogs. And it came out that big water tower. So I've grown up seeing this, and that plexiglass that's such just a wonderful idea. I love that. Because it's a great, it's really neat to see. But you're right, like we were always told, like, don't get too close to the edge, you're gonna fall in. I mean, it was very scary too. So if you had the plexiglass, I'm very excited about that. Very. I love it. I love it.
Some of my kids I actually encourage to play ball. You go stand over
Yep.
by the hole and I'll throw the ball
Well,
to you.
yeah.
Now, and I failed to mention, and I can't believe I did, not only the work that we're doing at the municipal building, but the last 3 years, the city commission has put more than $100,000 into the Little Red Schoolhouse. And these are slow projects. They're not, we're mostly working on them with our staff, doing a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. But if you take some time, walk through the Little Red Schoolhouse, there's been some impressive work. Both of those buildings started with some significant foundation work, but the foundations on both of the buildings was in jeopardy, and we spent a lot of money just pumping things straight down into the soil. You think, wow, that's way a lot of money that you can't see it on the outside, but it did. There were some large cracks in the wall at the municipal building, and it stopped those, and we were able to cure that. The same thing, we had to add half a dozen new piers underneath the Little Red Schoolhouse. It just didn't have enough underneath it, and it was starting to settle. So the commission has communicated to staff, we own some old buildings, and the ones that we're owning, we're going to make sure we maintain them and preserve them moving forward.
Mike, you said something. Any report on the
I think the key word was a tap house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know, but I was just saying.
That was one of the, probably a leading conversation piece for this building. And the commitment, we are, it's not our highest priority project, but we are putting together an RFP document that would allow the private sector to come in and say, we're proposing a 50-year lease, no annual fee or $10 a year. But they'll have to make the investment of fixing the facility up beyond the roof that we're putting on it, and then they would get the lease. And we've had a conversation with a number of would-be breweries about whether they would like the building. They all like it for the tap house side. All would require the construction of another building to do the brewing part of it. It's too small of a building. It's only about 2,500 square feet.
And it's now the American Icon Brewery. Group came in and renovated it in the last several years. Really, I mean, the diesel, the whole power plant is still there. And they painted it up, and they have all kinds of historic exhibits there, photographs from about the time. It's kind of really cool to see that. So preserving that, I like the idea of preserving the engine.
It is nice. Tallahassee also has their original power plant is now a very nice restaurant. It's called the Edison. If you ever get a chance, check it out. Check out the whole park, because that park is a demonstration of what a CRA can do to benefit your community. This was a hazardous waste site from where they had owned a power plant and had all sorts of nasty liquids drain out. It was also at the bottom of the world, so they have converted it into a really nice stormwater park. It's got an amphitheater in there. They have live music, have a couple restaurants, splash park for kids, a brand new skate park. Probably a little bit bigger scale than what we're thinking. Yeah, I'm
Last
kidding.
part, back up a little bit.
Anyway, thank you guys for your
Hang
attention.
on one second, Mike, Mr. Chair. Mike, will you go through and just pick out 2, 3, 4 of the snazziest pictures in this and email it to the board?
Absolutely.
Because the architect who did these renderings also did the renderings for Newberry Cold Storage. And I posted those one day, and within about 3 weeks, that building sold to people who want to do what those renderings look like. Not necessarily the same kind of concept, here's what it could be. Same issue, right? Falling down on part of your list, but it's still absolutely their intention. I talk to them about it probably once a month to renovate the Newberry Cold Storage building to make it look like the pictures. So this is part of, right? When they came and said we got to tear the house down, and everybody was up in arms, and we said, guys, we've been talking about this for years, right? People say, well, I didn't hear anything about it, right? If this board will help share those pictures and say, hey, I've given more Sunday afternoon tours at the last minute to walk around and showing these pictures and taking people. It's an awesome building. The Newberry jails are right behind it, so there you can get to see a lot of Newberry history when you go in there and walk around and look around. But you know, when we sit up here and we say, well, what can we do? That's what we can do, right? We can share on social media. We can talk to people. When we all have different groups that we're involved in, we can say, hey, I saw a great presentation about the Newberry, the old Newberry electric plant, right? Let's, you know, do you want to open a tap house? Do you want to do something, right? The city is willing to work with people, but, you know, I have yet to crack the code of how to get the information out to everybody. I feel like I spend a lot of time projecting information out, and then we get to the end, and I didn't hear about it, right? So and a few pictures, share it on social media. This is what we can all work at. This is what we want to do. And, you know, this building, after the two-way pairs, is going to be right on a major road. Okay. So if you're a business, there's a lot of opportunity here, but there is a pretty hefty upfront cost. I mean, it is going to cost some money to renovate this building. Cities can work with you on leasing it and those kinds of things, but you know, it doesn't get you out of the right renovation costs. So, but the first step is letting people know that we want to do something viable there. We want to do something energetic. We want to bring something to Newberry, and it could be a super cool, historic location for you name it. You fill in the blank. So if you would send that out,
Absolutely.
I'll certainly share it again and put it back out there. I know not everybody's on Facebook. I get that, but it's a first stop, right? It's a way to get the conversation going. So,
Mr. Mayor, if you remember the movie The Hunger Games, we're going to get one of those amplifier systems so that you can just let everybody know at once.
Well, Mr. Mayor, if you crack the code, let me know.
yeah. If anybody else cracks it, please let me know.
Because it seems like there's some key words like demolish,
Right.
not gonna happen, 20 years, it's gone.
I think keyword would be building subdivision.
And I'm guilty of that myself. If I see something and it doesn't, but if it says, this is leaving, I'm like, what? So I'm very, very guilty of it as well. I just wish we could figure out, like, for instance, you know, we do the Christmas parade every year for 21 years on the third day in December, but there's still people every year who say the day of the parade, why doesn't anybody advertise this? It's very frustrating, but I also want to know how to do it better. I don't know. So I seriously I would benefit personally, I mean, we all would, if we could just figure that out.
And it's not just Newberry. I was just at an Archer Town Hall meeting, and every single Archer resident was upset because they didn't know anything. And I heard the Archer staff saying, well, we put it in the electric bill, we put it on the little banner that goes around, we talked about it. And I was like, man, this sounds just like Newberry, you know? Sounds just like everywhere. How do you get the information out?
Well, thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. That's pretty. All right, so with that, we got JP coming back for a discussion on the Historic Preservation Month. Is that correct? I like it. All right, thank you, JP. All right, with that, I'll move for members' discussion. Joe?
I just, I just think from looking at my hometown, what they did with the power plant, I think that's such a great project. I think a lot of people, involved with, maybe raising funds or whatever, if the city decides to keep it or bring it to a point where it might be viable for someone else to buy it, but. And then one other point too is, what we did in Gainesville many, many years ago was historic preservation. We started Historic Gainesville Incorporated, which raised funds, for preserving certain buildings that the city wanted to preserve or people in the community thought were worthwhile preserving. And I don't know if Newberry, would consider maybe starting a private entity like that, Historic Newberry Incorporated. To put more emphasis to raising funds and awareness for historic preservation. The organization actually did end up buying structures and restoring them and selling them at some point during the history of Bennington.
Thanks, Joe. Ms. Baker?
I have nothing.
Ms. Thomas? Ms. Polo? Vice Chair Long? I don't have anything at the moment. Do you, Mr. Mayor? All right, so with that, I'm gonna adjourn the meeting, but I am gonna have a recess, say let's return at 7:10. Gives people a chance to use the restroom, take a quick break, and, we'll recess at 7:10. Meeting of the Harbor is adjourned. All right, everybody, it's 7:10. I'm gonna go ahead and call to order. Planning and zoning meeting of Monday, March 6, 2023. All right, has everybody had a chance to read the agenda?
Yes.
All right. I don't see any kind of changes to the agenda, and we do have a full dais. So with that being said, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda?
I have a motion from Ms. Baker,
Second that.
and a second from Vice Chair Long. Do we have any comments on the agenda? Do I have any public comments on the current agenda? All right, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, aye, motion passes unanimous. Everybody had a chance to review the minutes from last month.
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
I got a motion from Ms. Baker,
Second.
a second from Ms. Polo. Are we gonna fight over this again, or?
No, I let it go.
Okay. Whoa,
Why you had to take it there?
whoa. Easy, easy. Water parks, now we're fighting. Come on, guys.
They're gonna start separating.
All right, any comments on the minutes from last month? Any public comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. All right, I gotta get the handy dandy cheat sheet. Do you have it? Who has my quasi judicial? Got it. All right, I don't know. All right, so I have to, no, I'm good. I have to read this because we are entering into a quasi judicial proceeding. What does that mean, since we have a lot of members in the room? This means that the commission will stop being a legislative body and will become a judicial board, which means we have to follow certain rules and adhere to different standards of decision-making. The primary rule we must follow concerns testimony, and substantial and competent evidence standard must be met when the judicial board makes a decision. This standard states the following: all public testimonies will be taken under oath. Everyone testifying will be subject to cross-examination. All documents and exhibits shall be entered into evidence. The giving of an opinion testimony is limited to experts. Closing arguments will be limited to the evidence of record. At which point I will ask the attorney to read over the ordinance and resolution by title and number. If anybody currently wishes to speak on any of the items tonight, I'm gonna have the city clerk or city staff swear you in. So if you are speaking on any of these items tonight, you are gonna be asked to stand, state your name, and be sworn in by city staff.
Okay.
There's a lot of people in this room.
Everybody stand up.
Thank you so much. Nothing's crazier than someone that didn't get sworn in all of a sudden wants to talk, and now we have to stop everything and get them sworn in to talk. So thank you for participating. We could do ex parte on all items, correct, at the same motion? So I will ask now, has there been any ex parte communications on any of the topics? Ms. Baker?
I have none. None.
None.
Since I run a couple of the forums, I did have like one small discussion. I even brought in city staff to correct me if I was wrong on someone asking about what the procedure was for mailing the notices. But other than that, like I said, it was correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't have a packet in front of me, but that was it. So I think I'm good. All right. So that's done. I will explain how the order of presentations will follow. in a quasi judicial format. Staff will go first with an overview, and then which the applicant will go ahead and present their application. Staff will go ahead and give us a report and recommendation. We haven't been contacted by any third-party intervener, so we'll go ahead and skip that portion. Public comments will go on after the staff report and recommendation. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes. The applicant at that point may cross-examine. Staff may cross-examine. Then as a decision-making body, through the chair, may ask questions of the staff, applicant, or the participants. A final argument may be made by the applicant, and then the staff related solely to the evidence and testimony presented at the hearing and introduced into the record. City Attorney, actually, I believe you can advise us now of all these, of the applicable law and factual findings.
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's the substantial and competent evidence standard.
Thank you. So, after this, we'll go ahead and deliberate on each item. And after deliberation, a vote shall be taken to approve with conditions, continue it, or deny the application. Continuation, so you understand, if a denial happens, a denial happens, it's flat. If a continuation happens, we can move it on to a further date. So there's the two big differences on that. So without further ado, I will ask Brian Thomas to go ahead and come up for public hearing ordinance number 2 while the attorney reads into the record the ordinance.
Mr. Chair, this is ordinance number 2023-12, LDR 23-05, an ordinance of the City of Newberry, Florida, relating to the amendment of the official zoning atlas for the rezoning of approximately 8.28 contiguous acres of land, amending the official zoning atlas of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations, providing for rezoning from commercial general CG zoning district to commercial intensive CI zoning district on certain lands within the corporate limits of the City of Newberry, Florida. Tax parcel number is 01924-010-004, providing severability, repealing all ordinances in conflict, and providing an effective date. Appropriate motion at the appropriate time is to pass, continue to a date certain in the future, or deny ordinance number 2023-12 LDR 23-05. Sir.
Before I proceed, staff, can you please let me know on these particular items, is there a date for that it'll be heard before a dais? I don't have that on my packet.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this particular item will be heard on March 27th for first reading.
Thank you. Sorry about that, I just didn't see it on there.
Okay. Mr. Chair, the applicant does not have a presentation tonight, so I'll just go ahead and go through the full staff presentation, which is brief. As stated, this is an application to rezone a parcel of property. It's on the south side of State Road 26, about 2 miles, almost exactly 2 miles from east of the traffic light at State Road 45 and State Road 26. It currently has future land use of commercial, and it has a zoning category designation of commercial general, which is a little bit lesser zoning, less intense zoning district than commercial intensive. So they are petitioning to change from commercial general to commercial intensive. Commercial general is typically something you would find, our type of commercial general zoning would be closer in the urbanized area, the downtown area, provides for small scale retail and commercial entities. Commercial intensive is designed for a little bit more intensive uses, larger scale retail, larger scale office buildings, things that are going to generate more traffic than you might necessarily want in the downtown area. And so hence it's appropriate for parcels and development areas that are a little bit farther out from the downtown core. It incorporates, like I said, all the uses in commercial general and then adds to those with a little bit higher intensive uses that are geared more towards automotive-oriented uses. Not oriented necessarily automotive like a retail sales, car sales, but things that are going to generate more traffic, more automotive traffic. An example, again, would be a large-scale retail shopping center or a large-scale office building. Stated the future land use is already commercial. That doesn't have to be changed, so it's not contingent upon a land use change. Water and wastewater utilities will be serviced by the city of Newberry, which will have to be brought to the site, and the electric is Clay Electric District. There's your general location map. As you can see, like I said, it's right at 2 miles east of the light in downtown Newberry. And a little bit closer up, you can see the ultimate RV storage is south of this subject property, and then the RV office is up at the front. I believe the general intent is to have some office buildings up front, which would front the state road, and of course would comply with our new design standards for the commercial corridor. And then there might be some other different types of uses. There might be an extension of the RV storage from the south side northward, and there might be some, you could do a number of different uses, everything that's in commercial intensive. It does have to be approved by ordinance, and so first it's heard by the Planning and Zoning Board for your recommendation to the commission, and then it goes to 2 hearings with the City Commission for final approval of the ordinance. Staff does find that it's complies with the City of Newberry's comprehensive plan and our land development regulations, and therefore staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval of ordinance 2023-12 to the City Commission.
Thank you.
And the applicant and agent are here if you have any questions directly for
So
them.
the applicant agent is here.
Both the applicant and the agent.
Okay. And they don't have a presentation.
Correct.
All right. Then I'll open it up to public comments on this particular agenda item. All right. Hearing none. There's no, take it, there's not going to be any cross-examination. So we'll move on to members of the decision-making body through the chairman, ask questions of the staff and the applicant. Cool. I don't have any questions. So with that being said, if we're not going to deliberate, I will go ahead and entertain a motion or a motion with conditions, or however you guys want to roll. I got a motion from Ms. Baker to approve. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Got a second from Vice Chair Long. Do you have any any comments on the motion? Any public comments on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimous. All right, Mr. Attorney. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. I'm gonna ask JP to come up for number 3, but I'll ask the city attorney to into the ordinance, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. This is resolution number 2023-23, and a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Newberry, Florida, serving as the Board of Adjustment of the City of Newberry, Florida, considering an application for a special exception to permit a church in an existing meeting hall building within the residential single-family RSF2 zoning district as authorized under section 4.5.5 of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations on certain lands within the corporate limits of the City of Newberry, Florida, repealing all resolutions in conflict, providing an effective date. The appropriate motion is to pass resolution number 2023-23 upon its reading by title only.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney.
Sir.
All right, JP, if you want to go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. John Paul Perez, Planning and Economic Development Department. The request is to approve a special exception, which is a church being permitted in a residential single-family zoning district. I'm just going to give a brief introduction to the item. The applicant's here, so he'll come up and introduce himself. He doesn't have a presentation prepared, just to introduce himself, and I'll provide the remainder of my presentation as well as the staff recommendation. The subject property is located at 145 Northwest 257th Street. The agent, the church that will be there, it's on Google already if you want to look it up. The Citadel Family Church. Owner is Pat Post. And here's an aerial showing the subject property in the City of Newberry. And the current zoning is residential single family. And I'm going to go ahead and bring Aurelius Garrison up now from the Citadel Family Church.
Hey, thank you. Hey, how are you?
To the chair, vice chair, Mr. Mayor, to the board. I'm Aurelius Garrison, pastor of the Citadel Family Church, looking to come to serve alongside you to serve the citizens of Newberry. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
All right. So in looking at a special exception, there are criteria that need to be evaluated. In the backup material for the item, there was an analysis done for all the criteria. They are traffic, parking, refuse, utility screening, signs, open space, other property. How is this use, which is not a use permitted by right, but is typically, you may be found in these districts or is acceptable in these districts, how does it impact those adjacent properties? In this particular case, it was a pretty easy one. This was originally a Methodist church, became a Masonic lodge, and is now going back to being a church. I had the opportunity to walk the property, speak with some of the neighbors, and they're all very excited about a church being there. That is not part of the analysis, just some rhetoric. I did take some photos of the adjacent properties so you can see, just for context, is one of the things that has to be presented as context for special exceptions. Here's the property itself, looking down east down Northwest First Avenue. This is the south elevation of the building. There's been work done to the building over time, and you can see some of the previous openings were closed up. Might be just hearsay, but it may have been something that was done while the Masonic Lodge was there. On the south elevation is where the signage was. It's been removed, but they're going to be putting it back up. Full disclosure, they've already submitted administrative approval to replace that sign. It's going to be same size, same location, no real changes going on there. They're also requesting to paint the building. That's also requires a certificate of appropriateness, also administrative. They've submitted paint chips, same color, so no change there. They were cutting the grass and everything too while I was there, so hopefully they'll bring back some of that landscaping. That's a previous sign that was for the IRA Carter Lodge, and here's the west elevation. This is looking southwest. I was told that this was the old home of the pastor for the Methodist Church or rectory. This is the southern property, which is unbuilt currently. This is the western property. Nice family lives there, I was told as well. And this is the northern property. This is my informant and gave me all the information. And then this is the eastern property. Unfortunately, I failed to take a picture of it. It's actually a very pretty property. But you can see it's all single-story structures. They're all vernacular in design and seems to be an appropriate use for the district. With that, staff finds the request satisfies the criteria of the special exception. We find that the proposed church is consistent with the historical use of the site, and we also find that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan and land development regulations. And with that, we recommend that the board forward a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment. That completes my presentation. I'm available for questions if you have any.
Thank you. Appreciate that. With that being said, do I have any public comments on this particular topic? If you would come up, state your name for the record.
Thank you for having me. My name is Heidi Lawrence. I live at 216. I'm 2 doors down, and we've seen quite a bit increase in traffic on our street. In fact, I've tried to inquire about speed bumps. But while I welcome the church, and I'm glad to have somebody there, can you just tell me the size of the congregation, where people will be parking?
We don't, so for public comments, sorry.
I'm sorry, it's my first meeting, and
So,
Thank you.
No, yeah, thank you.
I've only been with Newberry 3 years, and I love it here, and I love that you're trying to keep the historic.
Thank you.
Thank
Welcome.
you. But like you said, I welcome the church, but is there enough parking?
Okay. So the comments that so the way this works, and this is for everybody else
Thank you.
that's out here. When you address the board, you address the chair to the board, but you're also, any questions that you may have, we take them into consideration. However, we won't answer them.
Okay.
It's not saying that we're not gonna answer them.
I appreciate it.
Since we're not the applicant, we're not staff, we're just a judicial board, what we'll end up doing is referring back to staff once public comments is all done.
Thank you.
That's when we'll address all the.
I'm learning. Thank you.
No, yeah,
Thank you for
absolutely.
listening.
So for future reference, I know this is a little bit out of the norm, and I apologize for being out of the norm on quasi judicial. For any future reference, any questions you guys have, I'm not trying to ignore you. We're not trying to ignore you. We'll write them down. That's a great question. However, we won't answer it right away until
I'm not
we
asking
get
for
into
an
the
answer.
deliberation part.
Thank
So,
you.
No. Is that so? We have, the increased traffic is a concern.
Mm-hmm.
You said the parking. Is there any other comments that you want that?
Well, I know when it was the Masonic Lodge, they were parking all over the neighbors' property in their front yards, and, it's not a very wide street, and, my church, there's quite a bit of, there's lack of parking, and if it's a small church, that's great, but as long as they have adequate parking, and,
In the traffic.
yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Well, Heidi, thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate that, and welcome to Newberry.
Thank you, I love it here, thank you for listening.
Absolutely. Do we have any other public comments or questions for the board? All right, thank you so much. Hearing none, at this point, the applicant and staff may cross-examine if there's any cross-examination. If not, we will go ahead and start addressing you guys with questions. Cross-examinations? No? All right. I'll move on to members of the decision-making body. Through the chair may ask questions of staff, the applicant, or the participants.
To the applicant, I had a question that pretty much addresses the lady's question itself. Because I drive down that road every day by that building. So church size and parking would be probably the number one issue in that location.
So to address am I to address her concern or just yours? Okay. We are a small church right now. We consist of 4 families. So the parking will fit right on the parcel. In the event that if we should need extra parking, we have gotten the information of the lot across the street, and we would consult either with him to see if we could strike a deal to allow parking there. We'd pay for clearing the land, maintenance of the land, or we were also considering that, talking to the church here, that if the parking exceeded our parking lot, we would talk to them and maybe see if we could strike a deal with them for overflow parking. So that's the addressing of the parking. But right now we're a very small church. I think 10 members. So.
They only had a few parking on the grass, and
Yes,
that
sir.
was pretty much an issue, so
Yes, sir.
it'd be a problem, but glad to see you trying to do something with it.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
while the applicant is here, one, I hope you grow so big that you need a whole new building. But I grew up in the Church of Christ, and in the Church of Christ, if they sang too loud, they thought you were bragging. So sometimes you couldn't hear it even if you were in the worship hall. But that's not church anymore. And I love all my pastors in town, and almost all of them joined the Newberry Ministerial Association. But I will say I get more noise complaints now about church than you would really think of. So could you talk to us a little bit about what kind of speakers are you bringing in, and how much amplification do you use, or is it mainly just singing with the voices, or do you got you have a?
My church, again, we're small, so we don't even have a praise team. I am a one-man show right now, so I'm doing praise and worship and preaching as well. This is how I preach. So this is I basically teach. As far as amplification, I work the soundboard for a number of years in a couple of churches. So I understand sound. So to address sound issues, I'm leaving it all cemented up. Everything's going to be closed in, and getting electric drums so that we can control the level of sound that comes out, and it'll be keyboard, organ, and all of that has volumes, so we'll just keep it low. But
At what time does service start?
service starts at 11:30. Service will be starting at 11:30.
Okay.
So comparable, I think, to most churches around here.
All right, well, if you will, just be cognizant, it's a residential neighborhood,
Yes.
and sometimes that base is kind of what permeates out, so.
Yes, sir.
But we wish you the best of luck, and I hope parking becomes a problem for you. We want you
Thank
to
you.
grow and grow and grow. And
you
then
very
find a
much.
place where you can fit all those
Right,
cars. Yeah.
right. We'll have to come back before you to get some land changed over. Any more questions? All right. Thank you, sir.
Any other members have any comment, any questions for staff or the applicant or participants?
I have none.
All right. So that just kind of gives you a preview of how it kind of works. Guys, your questions will be addressed. However, in the manner they're addressed is not the normal because it was a quasi judicial proceedings that we have to follow. So with that sidebar, we will, is there any final arguments that the applicant or staff want to make? All right, and we'll deliberate. If we don't deliberate, I will entertain a motion. So is there any questions that we have to discuss, or not, we'll move forward with a motion.
I motion to approve.
I got a motion from Vice Chair Long.
Second.
I have a second from Ms. Baker. Any comments on the motion? Any public comments on this motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimous. Best of luck to you, sir. Godspeed. Huh? Oh, that one's going before the commission on the 13th, not the 20,
It'll be the Board of Adjustment on March 13th.
on
Yes.
March 3rd.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, next Monday.
What do you mean next month? It is,
Said Godspeed, right? Moving it through.
Spring break Monday. Sorry.
all right. All right, we're moving on to item number 4, which is, JP, you're leading the way on this one, but I'll have the attorney read it to the ordinance.
Yes,
Section
sir,
number
this
4.
is ordinance number 2023-09, CPA 23-05, an ordinance of the city of Newberry, Florida, amending ordinance number 4-91 as amended, relating to the amendment of the future land use plan map of the city of Newberry Comprehensive Plan under the expedited amendment procedures established under sections 163.3184, subparagraph 2 and 3 of the Florida statutes, and in conformance with sections 163.3161 through 163.3215 of the Florida statutes, providing for a change in future land use classification from agricultural to public on certain lands within the corporate limits of the city of Newberry, Florida. Tax parcel numbers are 02538-008-000 and 02538-009-001, consisting of approximately 96 acres, providing severability, repealing all ordinances in conflict, and providing an effective date. Appropriate motion is to pass ordinance number 2023-09 upon its reading by title only.
All right, JP, before you start, I know a lot of people are here for, I believe, so this is a rezoning of the current land use. We understand that there's a lot of talk about the meat packaging plant and processing and whatnot, and we 100% respect that and respect your time of being here. However, when it comes to the quasi-judicial procedures, I want to make sure that everybody understands, we are talking about changing the land use. Now, what actually goes into that land is not the topic of the quasi-judicial procedures. We are talking about changing it from, like the attorney said, from ag to public. Now, public could mean a lot of things. It could mean the meat packing plant. It could mean a lot of other things. However, the mayor is here. We will address public comments and concerns on the meat packing plant. I just don't want that to intertwine with the changing of the land use from agriculture to public use. Does that hope I made sense on that? Does my board understand what I was trying to get at with that? Where the meatpacking plant is not a discussion on this quasi judicial. I know we get very heartstrung and want to talk about what's going to happen in that public use. However, that is not what's being discussed. It's just agriculture to public use. Huh? Oh, that's legislative. So, sorry. That's for the quasi judicial. I'm sorry. Yeah, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood we do want to address the meat packaging concerns. I know a lot of you want to talk about that, and we're here to address that. However, on certain items, we're just moving it from agriculture to public. So with that being said, JP, sorry.
Thank you, Mr.
So we're in legislative now. Sorry.
I appreciate the information. Again, John Paul Perez, Planning and Economic Development Department. And as Mr. Chair has introduced, it is a future land use map amendment only that's being considered tonight. This is for the site that's been identified by the city as the environmental park. Here's a general location of the site within the city of Newberry limits. Consists of 2 parcels, total of 96 acres. And here is the current future land use. It is agriculture currently. Adjacent to it is the existing wastewater treatment facility, and that currently has a future land use of public. And the request of the city, went too fast there, is to change this site to public. So we're just changing the future land use for city-owned property from agriculture, which was present when we purchased it, to public now that we own it, have intentions of using it, we're changing it to public. Here is an aerial of the subject property showing just some adjacent uses. There was that West-owned development to the north that was heard recently by commission. Recently, I should say last year. The municipal cemetery, as well as the wastewater treatment plant. The environmental park, some of the uses that are contemplated, and I wanted to just reiterate what the chair said tonight, we are not approving any development tonight that is at the site and development plan stage. We are not at that stage yet. We are just considering land use. So I don't want that to be confused, but some of the uses that have been identified for the site, some of them very necessary, that need to happen pretty soon. The wastewater treatment facility expansion needs to occur. There is some stormwater that's going to happen incidentally. With that, there's an educational exhibit associated with that. And I think something that a lot of the households will like is like a rural collection center where you can drop off household hazardous waste. There's a composting component, as well as the USDA meat processing and jobs training facility.
Mr. Chair, there's one more thing. There's a fire training facility that's also highly being contemplated out there. The county is very excited about that. So this would be where the firemen would come to actually train on 3 or 4 story.
Wow.
We're not talking about that today.
No, I'm just adding one more thing to the slide.
In all fairness, I told the public, we were just talking about changing the land use.
Thank you for that correction. Part of land use, we look at concurrency. Because what the plans for the site are pretty nebulous, we just have to use some sort of generic form. For that report, we used just what the floor area ratio is, which is 0.25. It's the smallest floor area ratio I've ever worked with. But it's the smallest in the city of Newberry. Just given the size, the larger the property gets, the lower the floor area ratio is. Floor area ratio is just the amount of building you can have on a piece of land, and it's going to be based on how big that piece of land is. In this particular case, what we looked at was the wastewater treatment facility, which we definitely know is going there, and that's just going to be adding to the available capacity of wastewater. The number of trips and employees that are going to be there is pretty minimal, and that's the most that we could base our analysis off of at this time. flip past the findings there, but we find it consistent with the land development regulations comprehensive plan. And we do recommend that the board forward a recommendation of approval to the city commission. If approved, this would be heard on March 13th, next Monday, for first reading. That completes my presentation. I am available for questions.
All right, does the board have any questions for staff? Janine, can you just go back to the map, please? Oh, yeah, that one. Okay, so the subject property extends all the way to 18th Road, is that correct?
That's the northern boundary.
That's the northern boundary, so
It
it's not
is.
gonna impact the 15th Avenue.
No, you can't see 15th on this map.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
A little bit more north.
all right. You guys have any questions on the legislative portion of what was discussed? Yes.
I don't have a question, I just want to make a comment, and it's really more just saying good job to our staff, because not every city has this zoning package called public, where you put your own facilities and public works through the same process that we put the private sector through when they want to come and do something. And by having this zoning package that says what the city is doing is contemplating having public facilities, now it gives the public one more opportunity to come and talk. It gives more transparency, more scrutiny. Again, not every government does this, so we put ourselves through the exact same thing that we put private businesses through. We open it up for more public hearings and more opportunities for public comment and engagement in an effort to increase that transparency. So this is the first time we've put the second time that we put this new ordinance into action.
So the public land use exists in the comprehensive plan currently, and it's kind of always existed. Another one of the requests on tonight's agenda is the public facilities zoning district,
Right.
which is going to be for the entirety of the property. I think that's
We
item
did this
number
with
6.
Canterbury. We put the county through it. So anyway, I just want to say kudos for opening this up and going the extra mile. So thank you. I think it's good that we do to ourselves what we do to everyone else.
Do you have any comments? All right, any public comments on the legislative portion? All right. Hearing none, what would you like, what is it exactly you need from us, just an approval?
The motion, or the appropriate motion, would be to forward a recommendation of approval to the city commission.
Okay. As the chair, you're aware I cannot make a motion. I can vote, but I cannot make a motion on any of the items.
I move to a motion to approve.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Long. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Ms. Baker. We're gonna have to just sit you in the corner. Do we have any comments on the motion? Do I have any public comments on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimous. All right, on to the next legislative portion. Wait. Hold on. Yeah, number 5 is legislative. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is ordinance number 2023-10. It's CPA 23-08, an ordinance of the City of Newberry, Florida, amending ordinance number 4-91 as amended, relating to an amendment of the future land use plan map of the City of Newberry Comprehensive Plan under the expedited amendment procedures established in sections 163.31842 and 3 of the Florida statutes, and in conformance with sections 163.3161 through 163.3215 of the Florida statutes, providing for a change in future land use classification from agricultural to public on certain lands within the corporate limits of the City of Newberry, Florida. Tax parcel number is 02538-004-000, consisting of approximately 2.5 acres providing severability, repealing all ordinances in conflict, and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion is passed. Ordinance number 2023-10 as read by title only.
Thank you. All right, JP. So, hold on, just want to clear, at the end of everything, after all this is done, I know it's not on the agenda, but I'm pretty sure I'll get a head nod here, that we would allow public comments at the end of the last quasi judicial to address the concerns of what could be possibly coming, what the neighbors would rather see or rather not see. I want to make sure that we're all on a head nod, that we're okay for public comments at the end. All right. So, I just want to make sure we're on the record that we're allowing, even though it's not, I noticed it's not on the agenda, but I'll open it up for public comments at the end of everything.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, John Paul Perez, Planning and Economic Development Department. This is a request to change the future land use for a 2.5 acre property as part of the municipal cemetery. Here's the general location of the property within the city limits. Here is the property. It's on that 15th Ave corridor that'll be extended that you were asking about. That northern part of it touches what will be 15th Ave. The current future land use is agriculture, as it was when we acquired it. We are proposing to change it to public. This is the subject property and some of the surrounding properties. Acquired in 2021. We're just aligning the future land use with the remainder of the cemetery. No additional impacts are expected with this land use change. With that, staff finds it consistent with the comprehensive plan and land development regulations, and we do recommend that the Planning and Zoning Board forward a recommendation of approval to the City Commission. And if approved or recommended for approval, we'll have hearing on March 13th.
Thank you. All right. Aaron's questions? All right. You guys know the drill.
Motion to approve.
Got a motion from Vice Chair Long,
Second.
second from Ms. Baker. Do we have any comments on the motion? Public comments on the motion? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Woo, you almost, but it's okay. Thank you.
Did you say we could also address the 96 acres at this time too, or was it too late? And I just had a quick question regarding the time frame. I'm sure the public's going to ask.
So the 96 acres on the public,
The wastewater, the sewage expansion. The question was going to be, how long do you think it would be before the public could address their concerns about that meat processing plant on that property?
so,
Because I know tonight's not about that, but
yeah,
when would
tonight's
it
not
be?
about that. However, because knowing that the public did come out to express concerns, I want to be on the record with those concerns. I did go ahead and I got an official head nod from the board that we would allow public comments at the end of, like normal, in a normal DIAS meeting, a normal commission meeting, there is time for public comments at the
But
end of
that would be
everything.
my only question, the time
Yeah.
frame of when it might be happening that we could make those comments. So
Yeah,
thanks.
it'll be at the end of everything. Thank you. Huh? All right, we are officially back in quasi judicial. JP, oh wait, I'm sorry. Yeah, I had a motion, sorry, to approve. Do I have a second? I had a second from Ms. Baker. Public comment was Joy, sorry. Do I have any other comments? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Sorry, JP. I know there's a lot of members here that want to get to public comments, so I'm trying to speed it up. We are back in quasi judicial for items number 6 and I believe items number 7. And JP will present, but I'll have the city attorney read it into the ordinance.
This is ordinance number 2023-11, LDR 23-08, an ordinance of the City of Newberry, Florida relating to the amendment of the official zoning atlas for the rezoning of 218 acres more or less pursuant to an application by the City of Newberry amending the official zoning atlas of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations, providing for rezoning from agricultural A and residential single-family RSF2 zoning districts to public facilities PF zoning district on certain lands within the corporate limits of the City of Newberry, Florida. Letcher County tax parcel numbers are 02536-000-000, 02538-001-000, 02538-004-000, 02538-005-000, 02538-007-000, 02538-008-000, 02538-009-001, 02538-010-000, providing severability, repealing all ordinances in conflict, and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion is to pass ordinance number 2023-11 upon its reading by title only.
Thank you. JP?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, John Paul Perez, Planning and Economic Development Department. The request before you is a rezoning from agricultural A and residential single family to public facilities on 217 acres, which is the two sites that we saw previously, the 96 acres, the cemetery, and this also includes where the current municipal water treatment facility is. Here is the general location of the site within the city limits. Here is the totality of the subject property, so those 96 acres, that 2.5 acres, and the additional land for the wastewater treatment facility. The current zoning is a combination of residential, single-family, and agriculture. We've recently adopted the public facilities zoning district, which is application-wise is a little bit more stricter than a kind of our traditional zoning district. So any sort of development that occurs in that has to go through you guys, has to go through the city commission. Typically, it'll just go to Board of Adjustment, but for public facilities and, you know, good faith and full transparency, it goes all the way to the city commission. And the proposed zoning, again, public facilities, and this is what it would look like if approved. On a colored map. Here is the an aerial image of the property showing just some of the surrounding uses and intersecting roads. Again, the environmental park does consist of several uses. They're all contemplated uses at this point. The only one that I can tell you that is definite is the wastewater treatment facility expansion, which all of our analysis has been surrounding. And the fire training facility that I left off was also left off that slide. I'm sorry. And again, our concurrency analysis was based on the uses known, and right now we don't have a square footage, so we just based off the maximum FAR permitted in the district, which is 0.25. What this does, it aligns the zoning district with the land use that was just approved. Does not approve any development today. Just want to be clear on that. Staff does find the request consistent with the comprehensive plan and land development regulations. And we do recommend that the Planning and Zoning Board forward a recommendation approval to the City Commission. If recommended for approval, we intend to have this on March 13th, City Commission. Thank you.
All right, is there any public comments on this quasi-judicial hearing? I'll move on to members' discussion. All right, any final arguments from staff? All right. And we will deliberate. If there's no deliberation, I will entertain a motion and then ask for public comments on the motion.
Motion to approve.
Got a motion from Ms. Baker.
Second.
A second from Ms. Polo. All right, do we have any comments on the motion? Any public comments on this motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes. All right, on to the last item before we get into public comments. John Paul, you are back on the mic, and I will have the attorney read into the ordinance resolution.
This is ordinance number 2023-13 LDR 23-09, an ordinance of the City of Newberry, Florida, relating to the amendment of the official zoning atlas for the rezoning of 4.29 acres more or less pursuant to an application by the City of Newberry amending the official zoning atlas of the City of Newberry land development regulations, providing for rezoning from residential, single-family RSF2 zoning district to public facilities PF zoning district on certain lands within the corporate limits of the City of Newberry, Florida. Letcher County tax parcel number is 02035-000-000, providing severability, repealing all ordinances in conflict, providing an effective date. Appropriate motion is pass ordinance number 2023-13 upon its reading by title only.
Thank you. JP?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, John Paul Perez, Planning and Economic Development Department. The request before you tonight is a rezoning from residential single-family to public facilities. Before I get too far into the presentation, I do apologize for the repetitiveness of this. When we originally brought the Public Facilities District before this board and the City Commission, we identified that there's 55, maybe 56 properties in the City of Newberry that the city owns. I don't know how many of those properties we intend to rezone to public facilities. Those that do have active plans, you may see these again. Since this is kind of ministerial in nature, because a lot of these uses are already existing, and we just adopted the district, and we're just aligning the zoning with the new district. Perhaps we can find some sort of way to make this process a little quicker for you guys, because we do appreciate your time. So this is the rezoning from residential single-family to public facilities for 4.3 acres, which is the current municipal works facility. At the Historic Architectural Review Board presentation on the old power plant, that's what we're talking about right now, that site. That site is, there's a general location within the city limits. That site's currently zoned residential single-family. Government buildings and residential single-family are a special exception. We're just changing that to public facilities. So the zoning map would look like that. There's no actual change to the property occurring today or with this request. And I don't believe there's any expansion of public works site in the budget currently, so no changes there. Here's an aerial image of the site. And you can see the adjacent uses, roadways, and the development of the site. And again, we're just aligning the zoning district with the existing use of land and the future land use. There are no changes or additional impacts with this application, and staff finds the request consistent with the comp plan and the land development regulations. And we do recommend that the Planning and Zoning Board forward a recommendation of approval to the City Commission on this petition. If approved, we intend to have this heard on Monday, March 13th. That completes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Spring break Monday is gonna be fun.
All right. Do we have any public comments on this particular agenda item? State your name for the record again.
Joy Glanzer, thank you. If you find an investor to redevelop the light plant, would this zoning accept that, or would you need to rezone it at that point?
We found an investor to
make that light plant into a tap room like Mike was talking about tonight, it probably would need to get rezoned from Public Works, wouldn't it?
yes.
But, okay, this is just for now.
That's a good question, but I don't think it would be.
Question.
Yeah, we'll let JP tell us the answer before I.
Joy, before I start speaking, is that your only question? Okay, cool. So public facilities allows for both residential and non-residential uses. There's no actual restriction on whether it could be commercial, though the one requirement there is it must serve a public purpose. So it cannot just be for private interest that these are used. So it does have to serve some sort of public purpose. A tap room could be demonstrated to serve a public purpose.
And just so the public is aware, in any iteration of this conversation, the city either owns the building and leases it or has first right to purchase it back. And the RFP will be heavy on the historic preservation. So it's not going to be we just give you the building and you do what you want to with it and change it. It's going to be, you show us how you're going to preserve the building. And then there's going to be some stipulation of how, if you decide it's not working out, the city gets the opportunity to get it back. Or we just continue to own the building and when you get a 100-year lease or something. So the city wants, the commission is not prepared to sink, $1 million into the building of public tax dollars, but is not prepared to also just hand it over and be out of it, so.
Thank you, that was good, thank you. Do we have any other questions? That was the exact question you had? Wow. Amazing. Guys have any other, Baker? All right, if we don't, any final arguments? All right, hearing none, we can deliberate or go straight into a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I got a motion to approve from Ms. Baker.
Second.
Got a second from Ms. Thomas. Any comments on the motion? Public comments on this motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimous. We are officially out of quasi judicial. We did add to the agenda item, just for the record, public comments. Sure, I'll allow the mayor to proceed with an update, and then from there, we will gladly take your public comments.
So, I don't know if everyone here is wanting to discuss the meatpacking plant, but if that's what you say to discuss, I have generally found that the bulk of the concern is about the phrase meatpacking, right? And when you say meatpacking, you see this big 1,000 head a day kind of operation. What we have conceptualized is a 15-acre spot. So we're leaving 15 acres aside to see if this is going to work out. The idea here is a very small regional plant, and I have talked to the county commission about the need to get out in front and start trying to communicate this kind of information, because when you just say meatpacking, you have a very different vision in mind. So the goal here in the mission statement is we want to try to empower small farmers of 200 to 500 acres with 50 to 100 head to be able to cut out all of the middlemen, take their cows directly to a facility and get a USDA stamp and be able to sell directly to Hitchcock's or Publix or a butcher shop or those kinds of things. So I know we're all concerned about the rate of growth in Newberry, but the city of Newberry doesn't build any neighborhoods. So farmers decide at some point in time that they're going to sell their farmland, and the last crop farmers sell is generally houses. So we're trying to explore this concept to see if there's a possibility that we can help incentivize farmers to profit off of their farm. So the answer to Joy's question is maybe twofold. For sure, the county is going to be voting on an interlocal agreement with Newberry on April 4th. Newberry will either vote on that in the last meeting in March or the first meeting in April, which would be April 10th. Now, all that interlocal agreement is going to do is give us the ability to move to the next step in the exploration process. So right now, this is a very small regional, just serving farmers within a 50 to 100 mile radius. We're conceiving of holding pens that would probably hold the cows for one day. So generally the smells and odors that happen are when you hold the cows there for weeks on time and you're feeding them out, right? So this is something that you drop your cows off in the morning, they're processed, right, and they're brought out the very next day. right next to a wastewater facility, so we figure the smells will kind of commingle at that point. Generally, people love to say to elected officials, well, if you think this is a good idea, go put it in your yard. And in this opportunity, I give the opportunity to say, sold, right? This is in my front yard. And I'm willing to continue with this exploration because this is going to be so vital to our farmers and their ability to make money that I think it is worth continuing to explore having this literally in my front yard. I think that what we are conceiving here is going to be something that is going to be productive and work for the community at this scale. And I want you to hear also that there's off ramps. So what the first conversation is, do we want to keep going and have this conversation and keep exploring? The economic study, which nobody thought was going to come back very strong, came back off the charts. The next part is going to be getting an operator and figuring out the day-to-day operations. And that's the part that I'm going to be really honing in on, because that's where you'll address a lot of these issues about how is it actually going to work? Are cows going to come in and out in one day? Are they going to have to be held there? If we say no now, we don't get the opportunity to explore that conversation and see if it will work out. But there will be an off-ramp for Newberry, and there will be an off-ramp for the county to say, you know what, this isn't what we thought it was going to be. This doesn't sound like it's going to work out. And absolutely, the county commission has committed, and Newberry has committed that not just for the meatpacking plant, but for the recycle center, the fire training, that Alachua County has got to fix 337. And I have heard from 3 county commissioners that they have no intention of doing anything out there until they fix 337. So there's a sort of a comprehensive look at all of the different moving parts here. And so I absolutely understand concerns and share concerns, but this is not 1,000 head a day. This is, all we're setting aside is 15 acres. So whatever it is, parking, everything has to fit on 15 acres. And I think I've 337 size, regional, 25 head a day. That's the update. April 4th is set in stone with the county. I'm just not exactly sure whether we'll have the fine points of that interlocal worked out to bring to the commission before then or right after then. But so one of us is going to have to vote first. So that's my update, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Happy to answer any questions.
So I'll open it up to public comments at this moment.
Schwigel answer. Do you know what part of the 96 acres the 15 acres would be on? Because West 1 is just directly to the north, and that's a pretty dense neighborhood. So if it'd be right up against that, it might not be so good. I mean, south or east, but you haven't.
We don't have a site plan yet. The latest iteration has the wastewater on the north, the 15 acres for the potential meatpacking just south of that.
Okay.
The composting, life soils just south of that.
Okay, so wastewater would be a buffer between West 1 and.
And there's a buffer around the whole property as well.
Thank you.
And we're going to protect all of those beautiful trees on the north side of that line 18th. We're going to keep those.
Come up to the mic, state your name,
and we might even get a paved road out of the deal. I'm not promising anything. I'm just saying.
Tommy Aslan. I live right where 18 is on 18th Road, and everything north, west, and east of me is getting developed, and south, west, and east of me is getting developed. I've been here 26 years. I welcome the processing plant because when Glenn was butchering at the cold storage there, I would take my pigs out to Chiefland, have them done and packaged there. So I have some history with those guys, and I appreciate what they do, and I'm sorry to see that's gone from here. But my concern is I just want to protect my quality of life that I've worked so hard to have here. So that's my only concern, is the buffer where we're at, so that I don't feel like I'm being squeezed from all directions. So that's all. Thanks.
I'm Beth Fields. I live in Country Way, so I live pretty close to where the water treatment plant is. But I would like the board to keep into consideration that the elementary school is right there. And I don't think you want some really heavy smells or, things that the children have to be exposed to that they shouldn't have to be. We already have some problems with the water treatment plant when they're spraying. And I imagine they're having to spray more now because the area is growing so much. And I do think that having more public facilities is the way to go. So I am kind of encouraging all these public work things, but I do also want to make sure that the value of my property doesn't drop because we don't do this in a, thoughtful way. That's mainly what I have to say. And also, how am I going to be notified when you're going to start talking about these development things? Because I know about this because I got the mailing.
Well, we put signs up. JP can answer that question about notification. And you can also sign up for a plethora of ways to learn about all things Newberry.
Okay.
Not Facebook.
Not Facebook, yeah. Jenny, will you turn off the
Yeah, can you turn
black
off
and
the red?
yellow? And people should have, yeah.
3 or 5?
Should be 3.
Just to answer the question about public notifications, same thing that happened with this application. We will mail you a notice if you're within 400 feet of the property. We will publish an ad in the paper, and we will also post a sign on the property. For a large property like this, we typically do multiple signs, so people see it at some point. It's probably easy to miss. Thank you.
I want to add to that.
Newberry app.
You don't have to, there's the Newberry app, but you don't have to live in the vicinity to get notified about meetings that are occurring. Even though I'm the chair, I get double emails. I get the emails from staff directly with my packet of everything that's going to happen. And I also signed up, I don't know why, but I signed up as a citizen to get emails as well. So I'll get an email from staff, and then I'll get a general email from the city of Newberry. Yeah, so I get like 4 notifications of everything that's happening in the city. One as a chair, but also as if I was just, I wasn't a chair and getting stuff as a citizen. It's a great way. If you have an email address, please get with staff. They'll put you on the email list. And there's also this great handy dandy Newberry app if you have a smartphone.
Yeah, Newberry, Florida Connect.
But yeah, and to your point, the amount of time I've been in Newberry, I've been in Gainesville 12 years, Newberry 7, and I came from Miami, and I'll tell you right now, the way things are operated here, I fell in love. I wanted to get more involved, and it's strictly because of the fact that we take into what you're saying and what you're saying, and we try to really bundle that all together. And really try to take into consideration a buffer. JP's even been like, you really want to extend the buffer? I'm like, yeah, we want to go from 50 to 75 feet in buffer because we want you to have that quality of life. So I want you to know that everything that I've experienced before I even joined the dais, I've seen city staff and the public servants really try as hard as possible to address any of those concerns that you have. Yes.
I just wanted, with an advanced treatment wastewater facility, you actually don't spray as much. So the smells won't be what they are now, actually. To the point about the elementary school, I take that point. I'm a teacher at the high school, and in every phase of the environmental park, we are trying to create a situation where science teachers, any teachers from any of the schools can take walking field trips. So for the advanced wastewater, we want to do a wetlands component. I'm working real hard. We got a $4 million grant with the state to have that component. I want to go to the next tiered level where you could actually take kids and walk and create like a bird watching kind of a situation. There's the same kind of educational component that is being explored with the meat packing plant as well, so that our kids can finally understand where food comes from. And You know, I understand there's people who don't eat meat and think that we shouldn't eat meat, but I think the majority of Americans are going to be meat eaters. And so having that understanding of, you know, the food doesn't just magically show up at Publix. There's a process that farmers have to undergo. And whether we have to ship our cows all the way out to Texas and the Midwest to spend months in a feedlot and then ship them back here, and I don't know if I get my cow back, right? I shipped a semi out. I got a semi load of meat. I don't know that that's necessarily my meat. And what we're conceiving here, if I raise grass-fed beef and I drop that cow off, I know I get my cow back. And I can sell to somebody, this is my cow that I raised, you know. So we are thinking very thoughtfully about how could this be a community educational. We understand that this is inside our urban services area, so it's got to be well buffered, it's got to be landscaped. We have to address all of these things. And if at any point in time in the conversation, we're not hearing the answers that we want to hear, we have those off ramps to say, this isn't going to be a good fit for us, right? We can maybe find you a different location, or you can partner with somebody else, right? But again, if we stop conversations before we have had the conversation, and people get upset at me a lot for being willing to talk. If we don't talk though, then I don't know the answers to those questions, and I can't give good advice to the commission or the P&Z board. So those are kind of the things that we are thinking about as we work through this process.
I'm Cindy Bass. My only question is this: USDA is what I keep seeing up here. Is the USDA, IFAS, who's proposing this? Or is it the city and the county together proposing at the meat processing plant? I got the letter. I didn't know what was going on until I got here tonight. So that's one question.
The county was the one that came to us, and they said, hey, this is what we saw happen when COVID shut everything down, and we had farmers that had all the meat on the hoof you wanted, but nobody could pack it, right? And so what we realized was there was a big flaw in our agricultural system. And so they said, what we need are these regional facilities. Would you be willing to explore it with us? I said, we'd be willing to explore it with us, or with you. So it's a county proposal. It's county money. City is proposing that we will provide a location in return for fixing 337, and then the county can explore this. So it's a county idea, but they're working closely with USDA and IFAS.
Okay, after dealing with, I've been here 74 years, so I've dealt with a lot over 74 years. When you say you're going to designate 15 acres, is it going to remain only 15 acres?
If they don't say real soon that they need more or less, that will be all that will be left to have. And we've been communicating that because at this point, the wastewater facility is taking almost 40 of it. The recycling needs 5. The fire plant needs 325. They haven't given us a final number. So right now, we're setting aside 15 acres. If they came to us right now and said, hey, it needs to be 18, or if we can get by with 12, we can make that adjustment. But I would say within the next 6 months, it'll probably be too late. If it gets any bigger than the 15 acres, it'll have to go somewhere else.
But ballpark will be around 15 acres, a little bit less or more.
When we started, they were thinking 5, and we said, well, you got to have parking,
Right.
Your government, you got to have all those things.
Right.
So we got to 15 as a buffer. So I don't know that they're thinking that they need all 15. They said, leave us 15 so we can do it.
Okay, my second question is, I keep hearing, because this is all new to me, from what I'm hearing, the north part would be wastewater, the middle, the next section would be the meat processing, and then below that would be the composting.
Composted life soils. Life soils is very exciting.
Recycling as far as?
That's tires, batteries, all the things that right now, I think the closest one you have to go to is in High Springs. High Springs?
Yeah, there's one in High Springs.
Right.
Yeah.
And that one is so busy that they were going to open up another one. So we said, well, look, we could use that here, right? We've got batteries and tires. Newberry does the 1 day a year, and we always have to shut it down. So there's 5 acres for that, and then 3 to 5 acres for the fire training which will just be that 3-story building with propane.
And that's for the county fire.
Well, City of
County
Newberry
fire.
will get to, and High
yeah.
Springs has fire. We'll all get to
Right.
train there and use
Right.
it, but it's the
Okay.
county fire.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you.
Uh-huh.
Hi.
Hi, Lauren Natwick. I live right on 1828. Been here almost 6 years. I just had a couple questions. You had mentioned that on April 4th and April 10th, that's when you're having your meetings about the exploration process. So my question is when are we going to, and if we are going to have the ability as public to contest any of this or have any kind of say in like where things are placed? I know that you guys said that you haven't actually figured out where things are gonna go. There's some kind of talk, but are we gonna be able to have any kind of part in that decision process?
Yes, you could come to the county meeting and you could talk to the county and hear it straight from the horse's mouth about what the conception is. Again, most people that I talk to, they're thinking this 1,000-acre, really big. They're not thinking small, regional, cows are in and out. So you could go there. That date is set. If we get the interlocal agreed upon among staff enough time ahead, because our last meeting in March is March 27th, right? So you'll be notified if it's on the March 27th meeting. If it's not on the March 27th meeting, it'll be on the April 10th meeting because the county is going to vote on it on their end on April 4th. If we don't have it on March 27th and the county votes on it, we still have to vote on it here, right? So if you can't make it to the county, an interlocal agreement is between two governments, so both of them have to vote and accept it. But again, this interlocal agreement will basically say the city agrees to set aside that 15 acres somewhere in the environmental park, right? Specific location to be determined later. And then the county will continue looking for an operations manager, figuring out if this is going to work. So the county also will have off-ramps. They may decide this isn't going to work. It needs to be bigger, it needs to be smaller, it needs to be in another location.
Okay, thanks.
All right, any other questions? Only once? Twice? Do we have any questions of the board? All right, so with that being said, I will move on to topics for members' discussion. Ms. Baker.
None, though I will encourage you all, as I also get the emails, that it's a great thing. You get an email for every meeting that the city of Newberry does with the agenda, so you know what's going on.
Thomas, nothing? Ms. Polo? I know it's early, but remind everybody there's a spring festival, April 1st, taking place in Newberry Main Street. I believe it's on Seaboard Drive, right next to it. It's a great way to show how awesome our little town is. So please come out to that. And then we recently just announced Westfest. I know that's a good fun event. It's a free family event, if I'm not mistaken, put on by the city and a few sponsors. And what's the date on West? On April 22nd. And I'm going to steal your thunder for a second, but I just want to recognize Ms. Thomas as being our hometown hero. We do appreciate, as someone that has a son in high school and is a freshman in high school and a little girl that's in elementary, God willing, will be growing through the high school system as well eventually. It is an honor to know that you are there, and I thank you for all you do for our students. I don't think you get thanked enough, especially anytime there's a need, you quietly just grab people and figure out a way to make things happen for these students. And I can't thank you enough. just so you guys know, her library, when I first visited the high school, she showed me how she stashes deodorants, soaps. She gathers all this stuff because she knows that, like, my son sometimes might forget to put on deodorant that morning, and it's a bad day, and she is like a mom to these kids, and you know, and some of these kids don't have certain things and folders and binders, and to know that she goes out of her way to collect stuff like this, it really is an honor, and you really are a hero to our community, and I thank you for being one of the best things of Newberry. So thank you, Kathy.
I do have to add, though, SGA gets the smell good products too. SGA started that care closet. So that was Mr. Marlowe and his SGA. But I do commend people who shower and use deodorant every day.
But that's just one of the countless things you do. I mean, the proms, the dances.
Yes, but SGA works really hard to do that closet.
And if you've never had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the library, you just haven't eaten. It's the finest dining in Newberry. Anybody can go in there and make one. I'm gonna have to buy her a whole extra loaf of bread now, because tomorrow every kid's gonna show up saying, "I heard about PB&J's."
I mean, people complain that we don't have a sandwich shop. Little do you know. We do.
You know, it's not the peanut butter and jelly. Anytime anybody makes a sandwich for you, it's better than you make it yourself. So it's not me.
Oh, holy,
Thank you, though. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Just a couple of things. Also on April 27th, the Newberry Opioid Task Force is partnering with the Newberry Fire Department. And we will have our first annual, we haven't come up with a name yet, but it'll be the first annual something, and we're gonna work together. And we partnered with Health Promotions and Wellness, so they're gonna come. It'll be a drug take-back day. If you got expired pills in the closet, you didn't need everything the doctor gave you, bring it, we can take it back, dispose of it safely. We're also gonna offer CPR classes, Narcan classes. Fire department's gonna be cooking. Something has yet to be determined, but it'll be delicious. Whatever they cook is always good. So come in the morning. I think we're looking at like 10 to 1, if I have that right, somewhere in there to have all the classes.
Pills and grills.
What's that?
Pills and grills.
Yes.
Easy.
I'm making a T-shirt in my mind right now.
This is the Gainesville Chamber of Commerce we're talking about over here. Jeez, I'm gonna have to talk to Eric,
Pills
man.
and grills. Pills, and thrills.
And then go to Westfest after that. I also want, we were talking about historic preservation, and a conversation that I'm having with the Newberry City Commission right now is hiring a CRA director. Right now, Mr. Thomas is a CRA director.
On top of everything else.
After like 5 or 6 or 7 other hats that he wears, and those other hats, I think, by right, take precedence over the CRA. I think that as I have been doing research about community redevelopment agencies, it is entirely part of the industry that the CRA director is also someone well-versed in historical preservation. Generally, these CRAs have to do with historic districts. Newberry's not the only city that is having this conversation and challenge of how to preserve these buildings that, have been left to decay. I've met with the president of the Florida Historic Preservation Society about how do you start up community historic societies that function well, because there's lots of communities that have them that don't achieve the mission, and there's lots that do and are very vibrant and are doing some amazing things. And I'm not an expert enough to know what's the difference between a city that has a historic society that's really doing things and a city that has one that's just a club and they meet and they talk about, old stories. So I bring that up to say, when you're talking to the commission, when you're out, if CRA directors, if you are involved in these kinds of conversations, I'm not sure that we're ready yet to hire someone, but I can tell you that as long as, the CRA director hat stays with Brian, no offense to Brian, but, he's got 6 other hats that he's wearing first. If we really want to take off preserving our historic downtown, we're going to have to find a person that has the same passion to preserve it that we have, that understands our community, that understands how to do that, and that is their mission. That's what they're paid to do. They come and work 20 hours a week if it's part-time, or 40 hours a week, and, you know, it's facade grants, it's historic preservation, it's historic society memberships, all of those kinds of things. So, again, I'm not sure that we're ready right now, but I don't think it's going to be long. I think, and that's what I hear this conversation up here is, how do we be proactive? In my mind, that's how you're proactive. You hire someone, say, hey, this is part of the CRA, this is part of what it's supposed to do, this is your job, go make it happen.
Are these conversations that have been had yet with other communities around us who have some successes to share and some pitfalls? I'm thinking about High Springs and Alachua in particular.
I have a meeting with Alachua in 2 weeks, I think. High Springs, I think it's kind of been a rocky road with High Springs. So, but I think there's just as much to be learned from things that didn't work out as things that did. So I like to talk to everybody and say, hey, that sounded great. Why didn't it pan out? You know, Gainesville has a lot of different CRAs, and a lot of the struggle that Newberry had in getting the CRA was based off of things that the city of Gainesville did that the county really didn't like, and that kind of soured them on CRAs. So we're struggling a little bit to kind of get past that sort of taste in everybody's mouth, right? But that's absolutely, in my mind, that's where we're at. We're at that, let's talk to people. That's why I met with the president. I was pleased he came all the way to Newberry. I didn't have to go to him. But to just have that question, how do we do this, right? How do we do this successfully? Because I think most of the folks that I know that want to be part of a Newberry Historic Society, they just want to get together and tell old stories. And that's great. But at some point, we need people writing grants. We need people coming up with a historic district HOA concepts, presenting it to you guys, right? We need that kind of work. Even the facade grants, which are funded, that still takes work, right? You have to make a presentation. You have to figure out these are the kinds of facades we like, don't like. You have to present it. You have to get a vote. Then you have to go out to the businesses and say, hey, we have a facade grant program. So, I mean, all of those things, and I get public's frustration about how long it takes in government. We all feel the same frustration, but when we are asking every employee to wear 3 or 7 different hats, it just gets hard to get everything done. So that's why I think CRA director is in our future. Maybe not this year, maybe not next, but definitely within 3 years, I think we're going to need somebody who we are paying to do this work. Just putting that out there on the plate. That's my last comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. City Attorney, staff. All right, with that being said, thank you everybody for coming out. Thank you for your patience. But the meeting is adjourned.